Welcome to another movie plot and enjoy the memories. We open in the kingdom of Abelar with a 12-minute prelude by a dampier named Hecate. Backdropped by paper for budgetary restraints, she says that the castle was besieged by an army of monsters sent by the vampire sorceress Zia. Along with her necromancer father Zuzia, they're trying to conjure a demon vampire known as the First Fang into existence. To rid them of this plague, Princess Mott's mother, who we never see, hires the legendary mercenary Oda, who sports a samurai bun, so you know he's legit.
You realize how silly this looks.
Along with his companions Duguay and Rodrigo, they travel to the Isle of Not Good Very Bad Things and cut a path through the creatures. They reach the vampire's lair, where Zuzia gives some exposition about turning his daughter into a cocoon, but Oda don't care and just runs him through. He tossed the sorcerer into the abyss, however the daughter was apparently too sexy to kill and Oda too stupid to keep it in his pants. The hunter slept with the vampire succubus while his boys just stood there offering emotional support from the sideline. Once the attraction wore off, our hero stuck his other stake in the vampire, turning her into dust and finally saving the world, I suppose. She either gave birth really quickly or Oda hung out here for 9 months because he ends up with a half-vampire baby. Unwilling to kill the little dampier, he gave her to the queen, where she grew up in Abelar as a servant girl to the court. 20 years later, Kara is still unaware of her vampire lineage and now serves the new Queen Mott after the previous one died. Everything is good in the kingdom until one day a pirate ship decides to sail to the burial place of Zia and screw everything up. Yes, Oda the Wise went and swept up all of her ashes to place inside a sarcophagus on Resurrection Island before leaving. They soon reform into the body of the sorceress, and we get a few wobbly effects as the entire crew disappear except for a single seaman. Presumably the butt-naked vampire absorbed their life force and asks the survivor if Abelar still exists, but it's hard to hear through her fangs.
Does it still exist?
Zia then sets her sights on the kingdom, giving the young princess Tanis visions of an impending invasion. Her half-sister Queen Mott knows that the only reason Abelar survived last time was because of Oda, so she sends Tanis on a mission to find him. She also reveals that the mercenary is Tanis's real father, meaning that he knocked up the vampire, then came back here and knocked up the current queen's mother. The sisters are helped escape the city through a secret passageway by General Hafez, who wastes a lot of time eyeball banging the queen instead of escaping. He also claims to have trained Tanis well with a sword, but it doesn't do himself any good as he's immediately fanged down by one of the invading vampires. Tanis, on the other hand, is told to run ahead through the city sewers while the queen stays behind to hold off whatever approaches. Zia enters and there's some back and forth about how the queen's mother slept with Zia's baby daddy, and it's all riveting stuff. The vampire leaps across the room onto the queen's back. At the same time, Tanis returns with a leaping downward strike of her own. She cleaves Zia down the center like a Subway sandwich and runs off with Mott, but the supernatural being just sticks herself back together. The queen sends Tanis up a drainpipe, but before she can join her sister in escaping, the vampire catches up. Tanis must watch as Zia drains her mother figure's blood before fleeing from other freshly converted vampires. She kicks them in the face a few times before opening the grate and manages to board a ship bound for anywhere but here. As the survivors sail away from Abelar in their low-resolution galleon, the vampire finishes her meal before heading up to the boats. Since she's also a sorceress, Zia can apparently just create a storm and shoot lightning bolts out of her hand, but was still defeated by a stake. She capsizes the ship while inside the castle. Running parallel to these events is Dernier trying to help Kara escape from Abelar. One of the converted servant girls, Lavana, bites Dernier, immediately transforming him the moment she jumps off his back. She then captures Kara and holds her breasts out for some reason while the guard bites her, killing off her human side. Now a vampire herself with a mouth full of fangs, she struggles to understand what the other chick is trying to say.
Learn the whereabouts of his father.
Zia has given orders that the trio of servants must track down the princess who survived the shipwreck and washed up down the beach. Turns out the sorceress's little weather experiment killed every person on board the ship except for the person she was targeting. Tanis drags herself up even richer than before as she collects the life savings of everyone who perished. She also washed up right down the road from where she was going anyway, so walks the rest of the way to the outlaw city of Duras. They call it a hive of scum and villainy, though nobody bothers the dainty little blonde who wanders through in search of her abandoned siblings. Following a trail to where her father's legend runs hottest, she finds a seasoned scoundrel named Aedan gambling in a grimy tavern. He cheats against a giant Iberian, getting him beaten up with barely any resistance and thrown into a pair of deceptive fun bags. They're attached to a toothless grandma, so both look at each other like ew before returning to the one-sided beatdown. Tanis steps forward, not convincing enough to prevent it, but is enough of a distraction for Aedan to knock the giant man out. Aedan then tries to get with his own sister, and you would think that her telling him that they share the same father would put him off, but you would be wrong. For some reason 3 patrons try to attack them, so Tanis cuts off one's tongue then stabs him and another to death. Lucky number 3 only gets knocked out by Aedan before Tanis proves her identity because all of Oda's kids carry these rusty fishhooks around their necks. Kara arrives at the city hunting her siblings and slips into the tavern unnoticed to listen in on their conversation. One guy notices but she just kills him and Aedan finally caves to helping his sister find their father for money instead of sex. He says they have another half-sister who's locked in the town jail and takes her father's abandonment more personally than the rest. Malia is happy to confront their father and has much more street smarts than her naive little sister and oaf of a big brother. Of course neither of them would be helping Tanis at all if she wasn't promising a hefty bounty for completing the mission. She also says that they need to find father before the full moon, which is when Zia will open a portal to the underworld and it will be too late. In order to get horses they wait for the giant from earlier to arrive looking for revenge and do some weird rug pull over his head thing. It gets them 3 horses which were all required to lift the large Iberian and use them to travel to the home of yet another sibling. Rajan was once the emperor's assassin but has retired to build a quiet life as an innkeeper and spends most of her days drunk. She already knows Aedan but meets her 2 sisters for the first time who in turn meet Rajan's daughter, their niece Alana. This whole thing puts the mess in domestic but they're teaming up to find their father, so I guess that's fitting. Rajan is the only one who has fought alongside him while Alana only joins to get the hell out of her mother's inn. Their conversation is listened into by some woman who Kara kills when she shows up and replaces as the eavesdropper. The siblings ride to the seaside fishing town of Nobu where their father is rumored and split up to search for the legendary swordsman. At one of the taverns Tanis runs into a seasoned adventurer who just finished bedding half a dozen much younger women. Before his next adventure the old man Talon gives the princess a big old kiss on the lips but she doesn't seem to mind. Kara relays their location to her mother using Lavana as a conduit who monologues but I still can't understand a word of it.
The warrior who helped Queen Adonia.
The trio are ordered to capture the siblings before they find Oda, so place tiny rags over their faces to hide their fangs. The vampires move through the city silently abducting the siblings one by one while also sucking dry some random women just for fun. When Tanis is the last one to be taken, Kara meets her real father who poses as a random bum which avoids any unwanted attention. He basically just says how much it sucks this lot have come here to ruin the town, then causes whispers in Kara's head to scare her away. We cut to the vampires standing in a field using the captured children to lure the man she was just talking to out of hiding. Without even being in sight, Oda shoots the blades out of his sword, killing Dernier but only maiming the women because we know how much he loves a succubus. Kara knows that he's the cloaked stranger because she saw his 3-pronged sword that was once wielded by Talon. When she says that this is all in the name of her mother Zia, the slayer of demons, is like, well gosh darn, I thought I killed her. Kara throws the blade at Oda but Iuno reverses it back into her stomach, which he doesn't even acknowledge as his own daughter. Zia cries out from her little summoning cocoon back in Abelar and uses her teleporting spell to retrieve the surviving Kara and Lavana. We're told by Hecate that Oda goes on a quest to retrieve his children, but we see none of it and instead just show him in the desert with some dude. A sorcerer called Bardo. This actor played the original Red Skull and now also meets one of the heroes who defeated him on an astral plane. He's come to serve the demon vampire Zia and explains that sacrificing the 5 of Oda's children will resurrect her father. We don't actually see any of it and are just told by the narrator that Oda rescues his children because the movie's funding ran out. They must escape and then return with their gear because the next time we see them they're all entering Abelar Castle through the drain that Tanis originally escaped from. They cut their way through the monsters in the sewers, of which we see a single bald vampire, and reach Zia's chamber where something strange happens. Oda comes around the corner and leaps at a vampire behind Aedan, killing it, but also getting mortally wounded in the process. We don't even see anything stab him, just blood on his hands, and Oda says some generic lines of motivation to encourage his offspring. He says that they have a demon vampire to slay and many journeys ahead of them before dying in the least legendary way possible. Going full paper for a moment, we later learn that Oda was just faking it so that he could ditch his children again, as he really is that kind of guy. Somehow Dougie and Rodrigo also survived the siege of Abelar but are still dressed in their guards' uniforms like months later. They're too old for this line of work and join Oda in his adventures to slay a dragon, though we never get to see that either. Meanwhile, all of the ingredients are in place for the epic final battle, but that pesky budget does it again. We at least learn from Hecate and a series of cartoon panels that the siblings reached the evil cocoon containing Zia. She didn't have time to become the first Fang, so emerged a half-baked snake-looking thing that Aedan cut down to become the savior of Abelar. Adding another layer of confusion to this trifle of an ending, Hecate wakes up in the middle of the desert some 20 years after these events. It turns out that Kara and Aedan are her parents, which means that the brother knocked up his half-sister after all, and what's the bet, it was after killing her parent. Like father like son, I suppose, but Hecate is now possessed by the first Fang with no explanation for why and sniffs around like a bloodhound to track down her family. And the movie ends.